Have you ever dreamed of being paid to not show up to work? For many NBA players each year, that becomes a reality thanks to buyouts. Though it sounds fantastic, there has been a pretty common trend in how players' careers go after reaching this point. I'm going to take a deeper dive into this and also explain how, given the NBA's current salary landscape, this could lead to opportunities for players that weren't previously there. While it's become more common in basketball, depending on where you're from, buyouts are more notable in American or international football. In soccer, this usually relates to players with transfer fees, where a team wants to acquire a player from their club, and if a deal isn't reached, they can pay a player's buyout clause, which is usually above the expected market value. This is pretty much the opposite of how it works in other sports. In college football, this applies to coaches who have long term deals with universities and are fired with time left on the deal. With some coaches signed to deals that are 8 to 10 years long, this could be a major payday, and as of November 2023, universities and major conferences owed over $146 million in buyouts to fired coaches, which is a number that's likely only increased. For NBA players, there is a similarity to the college coaches, where they agree with their team to get out of the contract and give up a portion of their salary to become a free agent after clearing waivers. A lot of times, this occurs with older players at the end of their careers, but it can happen to players on larger contracts to save money as well. Some teams like the Suns recently did this by buying out Bradley Beal in a move to have financial flexibility. Beal will still be owed over $90 million by the Suns, but the buyout saved the team $175 million this season alone in luxury tax. The other interesting thing with buyouts is teams can alter how they want to spread out the money they owe the player. Phoenix, for example, will have around $19 million in dead cap space, accounting for what they owe Beal each of the next 5 seasons, though some teams, like the Pistons did with Blake Griffin a few years ago, might prefer to just rip off the band-aid and pay it all at once. Now let's take a look at some of the notable players who've been bought out and their performances afterwards. Typically, your player who gets bought out is looking to sign with the team hoping to be competitive and ideally play a key role for them. A prime example of this is Boris Diaw, who was bought out by the then Bobcats in 2012 and eventually joined the Spurs. Diaw had a skill set that was ahead of its time, given his size and versatility, and he became a vital part of 2 Spurs teams that made the NBA Finals and won a championship with the franchise in 2014. If you didn't remember that Derrick Rose was once traded to the Jazz, you're not alone, but in 2018 the franchise bought him out, and Rose then signed with the Timberwolves. Rose only played 9 games the remainder of that season, but during the 2018-19 season in Minnesota, Rose averaged 18 points a game, had one of the most efficient seasons of his career, and even earned some 6th Man of the Year award votes. Though in recent years, there have been numerous players on large or even max contracts that have been bought out of them. At age 27, coming off his 5th straight season of being named an All-Star, John Wall signed a 4-year Supermax extension with the Wizards. Unfortunately, he tore his Achilles before the deal kicked in, which is a huge deal for a guard whose speed and athleticism is vital to their game. Wall was then traded to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Russell Westbrook leading up to the 2020-21 season. While he played 40 games for the Rockets that year, the team opted to have Wall not play, but be around the team the following season. Wall that following offseason was bought out by Houston and signed with the Clippers. That lasted for 34 games before Wall was in a trade that again sent him to Houston, where he was later waived, and he played what was likely his last NBA game at just 32 years old. Russell Westbrook, who was traded to the Wizards in exchange for Wall, also signed a Supermax extension. He again averaged a triple-double in his lone year in Washington, but was traded to the Lakers the following offseason. The fit with LeBron James and Anthony Davis was an odd one, and a year and a half into the experiment was traded to the Jazz in February of 2023. He was then bought out by the team and signed with the Clippers for the remainder of that season, where Westbrook played some of the most efficient basketball of his career. After another year with the Clippers, Russ got traded to Utah and bought out again before signing for the veteran minimum with the Nuggets this past season. He's still a free agent at the time of this video. Some other players on larger contracts in recent years that were bought out include Blake Griffin, Ben Simmons, Kevin Love, Kemba Walker, and Andre Drummond. at their peak. All these players were all-stars, but the buyouts happened for various reasons. Griffin had an All-NBA season with the Pistons, but a year or two later, the team was moving towards a rebuild, and injuries had taken their toll. Griffin ended up spending a few more years in the league as a role player with the Nets and Celtics before retiring. After 2 seasons with the Celtics where he dealt with injuries, Kemba was traded to the Thunder in a deal that brought Al Horford back to Boston. Walker was bought out by the then rebuilding Thunder and signed a deal with the Knicks, where he was traded a year into the deal and played just 9 more NBA games. Through age 24, Ben Simmons was a perennial all-star and made multiple all-defensive teams. From that point on, Simmons has constantly dealt with injuries and also had some mental health struggles. The Sixers traded him in 2022 to the Nets in the deal that brought James Harden to Philadelphia, and Simmons played in just 90 games for Brooklyn before he was bought out and signed with the Clippers this past February. Still only 29, Simmons remains a free agent at the time of this video. The stories behind Love and Drummond's buyouts aren't as crazy. Both players were on the Cavaliers when bought out, as the team was in different stages of rebuilding. Despite Drummond being a highly productive offensive rebounder, the game has sort of gone away from his strengths, and he has played for a variety of teams since, but this offseason opted into the second year of his contract with the Sixers. Since being bought out in 2023, Love has played for the Heat and was a part of their rotation on their finals team the season he got there, though this offseason was involved in a trade that sent him to Utah, where he's a candidate to get bought out again. That's one interesting thing I noticed about the buyout market. It seems once you have the stigma of receiving a buyout, players are playing for or at around the minimum afterwards. One player who was an exception of sorts was Reggie Jackson. After being bought out by the Pistons in 2020, Jackson became a key factor for the Clippers off the bench the remainder of that year. He signed a 1-year vet minimum deal for the 2021 season and responded with the most efficient shooting season of his career, while primarily coming off the bench. The Clippers responded by signing him to a 2-year deal for $22 million, though the Clippers traded him in 2023 to the Hornets, where he was then bought out. The Nuggets signed Reggie shortly after, and he provided some depth off the bench and was a member of their championship team. Though a year after re-signing with the Nuggets, he was again traded to the Hornets, where he was also bought out before eventually playing for the Sixers this past season. With the new CBA and teams looking to save on potential apron taxes, this could create new value in the buyout market. This offseason, we've also seen a few players get bought out while in their second contracts, which, given a player's age at the time, isn't all that common. Granted, players would typically be available for a reason, but at the price points, it makes some sense to take a gamble. Bradley Beal hasn't played more than 53 games in any of the last 3 seasons. Given that and his weaknesses, he's not worth having on your team for over $50 million a year. Though if you're the Clippers and you can get him given what he can do for a little over $5 million, that's pretty tolerable. The Lakers are in the same boat with 2 of their acquisitions this offseason. DeAndre Ayton is about to turn 27, has no major injury history, and should be in the prime of his career. Though the Trailblazers, with multiple young promising centers on the roster, bought him out, and he signed with the Lakers on the non-taxpayer mid-level exception for 2 years and a little over $16 million. There have been questions and concerns about Ayton's effort level in the past, but if he buys into his role with the Lakers, a big payday could await him, as he has a player option for the second year. Otherwise, if he shows the same old tendencies, Ayton could be relegated to the fate many players have had after being bought out. The Lakers also recently added Marcus Smart, who was the Defensive Player of the Year in 2022, though dating back to the 23-24 season when the Celtics traded him to the Grizzlies. Smart has played in just 54 games, and 15 of those came with the Wizards after Memphis dealt him this previous season. Given that Marcus can play with reckless abandon, there are legitimate concerns about if he can stay healthy, and he will likely have the ball in his hands less frequently than he's used to with who the Lakers have on the roster. Though his advanced defensive metrics were solid in the smaller sample last year, and ideally, he could be a valuable point-of-attack defender who can hit threes off the catch, so for a short-term commitment at $5 million a year, it's worth the risk. So is being bought out the kiss of death for an NBA player's career? To an extent, it has been, as players being bought out were typically at the end of their careers, or due to a mix of age, injury history, and the game evolving, were forced to play for closer to around the veteran minimum. Though that could soon change, as players are hitting the buyout market at younger ages And even if they don't earn what they did in previous deals, they could fetch far more than a 1 year vet minimum deal. The talks for potential buyout candidates will likely heat up again around the trade deadline next year, so this will be an interesting trend to follow as everyone across the NBA looks to navigate this new team building landscape. If you made it this far, thank you, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with my latest in-depth NBA analysis.